When you hear the word Baghdad, what's the first thing that comes to mind? For a lot of us, it's probably headlines about conflict and instability, but that is such a tiny fraction of a much deeper, much more powerful story. So in this explainer, we're going to look past all that to understand a city that's defined not by its fractures, but by its incredible, centuries-long story of endurance. Let's just start with this one simple, powerful fact, something that's pretty easy to forget today. For centuries, Baghdad wasn't just a major city on the map. For a huge part of the known world, it was the map. And look, that wasn't just some honorary title. It was a functional reality. The city was the literal humming engine of its time, a kind of central processor for the entire world's ideas, its goods, and its power. So how does a city even achieve a status like that? Well, it definitely doesn't happen by accident. In Baghdad's case, greatness was baked right into the original blueprint. Way back in the 8th century, Baghdad was founded as this incredible master plan capital, the famous Round City. Its circular design was just a stroke of genius. It physically concentrated all the power, all the knowledge, and all the administration right at the epicenter of the Islamic Golden Age. And because of that amazing design, everything just flowed right to the center. The city became this magnet for the brightest minds and the most valuable goods. We're talking scholars, traders, scientists, philosophers, you name it. They all came here, and they created a place where ideas and commerce just moved faster and more freely than pretty much anywhere else on Earth. And that's really the core idea to get your head around. Baghdad wasn't just a place on a map. It was a function. You can almost think of it like a global operating system. It was processing all the inputs of trade and information from across the known world, and it was producing these incredible outputs of innovation, culture, and power. But, and this is a big but, being the center of the world has a really dangerous flip side. The city's greatest strength, its centrality, well, that also turned out to be its greatest vulnerability. It's a heck of a paradox when you think about it. On one hand, being at the world's crossroads guaranteed immense wealth and this constant flood of new ideas. But on the other hand, it meant that every major army and every empire, they all had to pass through it. That made Baghdad a permanent bullseye. You know the saying, all roads lead to Rome? Well, all roads led to Baghdad too, and that included the roads of war. And this pressure was just relentless. You see, Baghdad's decline wasn't a single event. It was this slow dismantling over centuries, from ancient invasions and colonial control all the way to modern sanctions and war. Each new wave put more and more strain on the systems that had once made the city so great. So that brings us to the crucial question, right? How on earth does a city survive centuries of that kind of pressure? Well, the answer is pretty fascinating. When the formal structures begin to fail, a whole new, much more resilient operating system starts to emerge from within. The answer lies in one word: informality. Now, this isn't about chaos, not at all. It's about people creating their own solutions, self-organizing to provide the essential services when the official systems just can't do it anymore. And you can see this playing out on the ground every single day. When the state power grid fails, private generators kick in. When public water systems are strained, local distribution networks pop up. When official institutions get weaker, it's the dense social networks that provide the real safety net. This informal layer, it isn't on the margins. It is the very thing that keeps the city running. And if you take one thing away from this, let it be this right here. It's the ultimate source of the city's endurance. When the infrastructure of the state starts to fracture, the infrastructure of community takes over. People become the system. But you know, survival is about more than just keeping the lights on. There's an even deeper source of resilience here, something that can't be broken by bombs or sanctions, and that's the city's cultural core. These are the things that carry Baghdad's identity. We're talking about poetry, music, storytelling, food, faith. These aren't just hobbies. In a place that has seen so much trauma, these are actual acts of resistance. They carry the memory of what the city was and the promise of what it can be again. And this is what is so important to understand. The true identity of Baghdad isn't defined by the rubble of its recent history. It's defined by this powerful, unbroken cultural continuity that just grows right up through it all. So what does all of this mean for the future? Well, this brings us to the single biggest challenge facing Baghdad today. It all boils down to this one huge question. Can you rebuild the formal systems, the power grids, the institutions, without destroying the informal, resilient community networks that kept the city alive for so long? The path forward is going to require a really delicate balance. I mean, yeah, it's about rebuilding infrastructure and reforming institutions, but crucially, it's also about rebuilding trust. It's about making sure all this new growth is connected back to the city's deep historical legacy. You see, Baghdad doesn't need to be reinvented. It needs to be reconnected. And maybe this is the most hopeful thought of all. Great cities, cities with a soul as deep as Baghdad's, they don't really disappear. They endure. They adapt. They wait for their moment to rise again. Ultimately, the story of Baghdad forces all of us to ask a much bigger question. When history really hits a city hard, what does it truly take to endure? Is it the strength of its walls, or is it the strength of its people?